Picture a glittering 1920s London theatre, the Apollo, where the curtains rise on a dance of shadows. A star actor, Julian Warwick, collapses mid-performance, stabbed by a real dagger meant to be a prop. Was it the jealous co-star Eleanor Vance craving the spotlight? The ambitious director Roland Baxter clashing over control? Or the lovesick stagehand Tom Riley scorned by the victim? Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of passion, betrayal, and ambition in this gripping tale of murder on the stage, where the truth hides behind the footlights. Chapter 1. The curtain rises, the Apollo Theatre, nestled in the glittering heart of London's West End, hummed with the electric anticipation of a premiere. Its grand facade, adorned with golden filigree and posters proclaiming a dance of shadows, drew a crowd of fur-clad ladies and gentlemen in crisp evening attire. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and heavy perfume, the chandeliers casting a warm glow over the crimson velvet seats. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with his impeccable mustache and polished patent leather shoes, sat in the third row of the stalls, his sharp green eyes scanning the audience rather than the program in his hand. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, fidgeted with his tie, his face alight with boyish excitement. "Splendid evening, Poirot," Hastings said, his voice bright. "Sir Charles swears this play's the talk of the season. Julian Warwick's the lead, you know. Brilliant actor, they say." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Oui, mon ami, but it is not the stage I watch tonight, it is the people. The human heart, it reveals itself in such places." Hastings chuckled, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic musings, and turned his attention to the program, which boasted of Warwick's commanding presence and the rising star, Eleanor Vance, as his co-lead. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the auditorium. The heavy crimson curtain, embroidered with gold thread, rose with a whisper, revealing a set of Gothic splendor, a grand hall with towering candelabras and shadowed archways. Julian Warwick, as Lord Roderick, strode onto the stage, his dark hair swept back, his velvet cloak swirling with each deliberate step. His voice, rich and resonant, filled the theater as he delivered his opening lines, lamenting a betrayal yet to unfold. Eleanor Vance, as Lady Beatrice, entered in a gown of emerald silk, her auburn hair catching the stage lights like a flame. Their dialogue crackled with intensity, a dance of words that spoke of love poisoned by ambition. Poirot, however, was not swayed by the performance. His gaze darted from the actors to the wings, where stagehands moved like ghosts in the shadows. He noted the director, Roland Baxter, a wiry figure with a pinched face hovering just out of sight, his eyes fixed on the stage with an almost predatory focus. In the audience, a woman in a sapphire gown stifled a cough, and a gentleman in the balcony checked his pocket watch. Poirot's mind catalogued these details, sensing the undercurrent of tension that no script could capture. The first act unfolded flawlessly, the audience enthralled by Warwick's commanding presence and Vance's subtle menace. But it was in the second act, during a pivotal scene, that the illusion shattered. Lord Roderick and Lady Beatrice faced each other in a candle-lit chamber, their voices rising in a crescendo of accusations. Beatrice, her eyes blazing, seized a dagger from a table, a prop the audience assumed, and lunged at Roderick in a choreographed strike. The blade plunged into his chest and Warwick staggered, his hand clutching the wound. A ripple of gasps spread through the theater, followed by nervous laughter. Such realism, they thought, was the mark of genius. But Poirot's spine stiffened. Warwick's stagger was too genuine, the pallor of his face too stark. As he crumpled to the stage, a crimson stain bloomed beneath his hand, vivid against the black velvet of his costume. Eleanor Vance froze, the dagger slipping from her fingers to clatter on the floor. Her scream, raw and piercing, cut through the auditorium, no longer the polished cry of an actress, but the sound of genuine horror. The curtain crashed down and the house lights flared, revealing a sea of shocked faces. Hastings turned to Poirot, his mouth agape. "Good heavens, Poirot, that wasn't part of the play, was it?" Poirot's mustache twitched, his eyes narrowing. "Non, mon ami, that was no performance. It was murder." He rose, his small frame radiating authority, and made his way toward the stage where the first whispers of chaos were already rising. Chapter 2. The Fallen Star. The Apollo Theater, moments ago a temple of art and illusion, had transformed into a scene of grim reality. The crimson curtain, now lowered, hung like a shroud over the stage, muffling the murmurs of the audience as they were ushered out into the chilly London night. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes clicking on the wooden floor, navigated the narrow passage to the backstage area, Captain Hastings trailing close behind. The air was thick with the acrid tang of stage smoke and the faint metallic scent of blood. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as a falcon's, took in every detail. The scuffed floorboards, the tangle of ropes in the wings, the discarded props scattered like relics of a forgotten ritual. Backstage, chaos reigned with the precision of a poorly rehearsed play. Actors in half-removed costumes milled about, their faces pale under smears of grease paint. Stagehands whispered in tight knots, their eyes darting toward the stage where Julian Warwick's body lay, hidden from view by a hastily erected screen. A young actress, her blonde curls wilting, sobbed into a handkerchief, while an older crew member muttered about curses and ill omens. Poirot, undeterred by the pandemonium, moved with the calm assurance of a man who saw order where others saw only disorder. "Poirot, this is ghastly," Hastings said, his voice low, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by a furrowed brow. "Poor Warwick, stabbed in front of hundreds. Who could have done such a thing?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his mind at work. "Patience, mon ami," he replied, his Belgian accent crisp. "The crime, it is bold, but the truth it hides in the shadows of motive and opportunity. We must observe, and we must think they reached the stage where a small crowd had gathered around the fallen star." Julian Warwick lay sprawled on the boards, his once vivid eyes staring blankly at the rafters. His velvet cloak fanned out beneath him, the crimson stain on his chest stark against the black fabric. The dagger, now resting a few feet away, gleamed under the harsh stage lights, its blade unmistakably real. A young stagehand, his face ashen, stood guard over it, clutching a cloth as if afraid the weapon might spring to life. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved hands hovering above the wound, careful not to disturb the scene. "The thrust, it was precise," he murmured, "not wild, not hesitant. This was no accident." A commotion at the stage door heralded the arrival of Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, his overcoat flapping as he strode in, his face set in a familiar mix of determination and exasperation. "Poirot," he called, spotting the detective. "Fancy meeting you here." "Another fine mess, eh?" He surveyed the scene, his eyes lingering on Warwick's body. Murder, plain as day, but how the devil did a real knife get on stage during a performance? He scratched his head, his bowler hat tilting slightly. Hundreds of witnesses and not one saw a thing. Poirot rose, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve. "The witnesses, Inspector, they saw what they were meant to see, a play." The murderer, he used the theater's illusion to his advantage, but the little gray cells, they will uncover what lies beneath. Jap grunted, accustomed to Poirot's cryptic pronouncements. "Right then, let's get to work. Who's our lot?" Poirot gestured toward 3 figures standing apart, each radiating a different shade of unease. Eleanor Vance, the co-star, sat on a prop chair, her emerald gown crumpled, her hands twisting in her lap. Her auburn hair, once elegantly pinned, now framed her face in disarray, and her eyes, red-rimmed, stared at the floor. Roland Baxter, the director, leaned against a set piece, a cigarette dangling from his lips, his sharp features drawn tight. Tom Riley, the stagehand responsible for props, hovered near the wings, his wiry frame taut, his knuckles cracking as he shifted from foot to foot. "These 3, Inspector," Poirot said, "had the means and the opportunity. Mademoiselle Vance wielded the knife. Monsieur Baxter controlled the production. Monsieur Riley handled the props. But the motive, that is what we must uncover." Jap nodded, pulling out a notebook. "Right. Let's have a look at this knife first." The stagehand, Tom Riley, stepped forward, his voice trembling. "I swear, sir, it wasn't the prop knife. I checked it before the show, blunt as a spoon it was." He pointed to the weapon, now carefully wrapped in the cloth. Jap crouched beside it, his brow furrowing. "Blimey, this is no toy, sharp as a razor." He glanced at Poirot. "Someone swapped it then. But when? And how?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The when, it is during the first act, when the stage is alive with movement. The how, it is simple. Someone with access to the prop table, someone who knew the rhythm of the performance." He turned to Riley. "Monsieur, you say you checked the knife. Where was it kept before the scene?" Riley swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "On the prop table just off stage. It's always there, ready for Miss Vance to grab in the second act. I checked it at 6 before the curtain went up. After that," he hesitated, his eyes flickering toward Eleanor. "It's a madhouse back here. Anyone could have got to it." Poirot's gaze shifted to Eleanor, who flinched under his scrutiny. "Mademoiselle, you held the knife. Did it feel different? Heavier, perhaps? Sharper?" Eleanor's lips parted, then closed. I don't know," she whispered. "It all happened so fast. The scene, the lines, it's all a blur. I thought it was the prop, I swear it." Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. Hastings, ever susceptible to a lady's distress, stepped forward, his expression softening. Now, Miss Vance. No need to upset yourself. Poirot will sort this out." But Poirot's face remained impassive, his mind sifting through the nuances of her words. He noted the tremor in her hands, the way her eyes avoided the body on the stage. Grief or guilt? The distinction was delicate. Baxter extinguished his cigarette with a sharp twist. "This is madness," he snapped, his voice cutting through the tension. "Julian was the heart of this show. Without him, we're ruined. Who'd want to kill him? He was a star." His words were fierce, but Poirot detected a brittleness beneath them, a hint of something unspoken. He filed it away, his mind already constructing a web of possibilities. Japp, meanwhile, had summoned a doctor from the audience, a doctor. Hargrove, who knelt beside Warwick's body. The man, bespectacled and somber, examined the wound with clinical precision. "Stabbed through the heart," he announced, his voice steady. "Death would have been near instantaneous. The blade went deep, clean, no hesitation." He glanced at the dagger, still wrapped in the cloth. "That's no prop. It's a proper weapon." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "Merci, doctor. The precision, it tells us much. This was not a crime of impulse. It was planned, executed with care." He turned to Japp. "Inspector, I suggest we secure the theater. No one leaves until we have questioned all who were backstage. The answer, it lies here among the players and their props." Japp barked orders to his constables, who began herding the cast and crew into the green room. Poirot, however, lingered on the stage, his eyes sweeping over the set. The prop table, a cluttered affair of goblets, candlesticks, and fake jewels, stood just beyond the wings, its surface scuffed from years of use. He approached it, noting the faint outline of where the dagger had rested, marked by a smudge of dust. Beside it lay a script, its pages dog-eared, annotated in a hurried hand. Poirot picked it up, his gloved fingers flipping to the scene of the stabbing. The stage directions were clear. Beatrice seizes dagger, thrusts at Roderick's chest. No mention of hesitation, no room for error. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low. "Observe the table. It is close to the wings, yes? Accessible to many, yet unnoticed in the chaos of a performance." Hastings nodded, his eyes wide. "You think someone slipped in during the first act?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "I think, mon ami, that the theater is a place of deception. The murderer used its rhythms, its distractions to strike." A constable approached, holding a small leather case. "Found this in Warwick's dressing room, sir," he said, addressing Japp. "His personal effects." Poirot's interest sharpened. "May I?" he asked, taking the case. Inside were a pocket watch, a silver cigarette case, and a small notebook, its cover worn. Poirot opened it, scanning the pages. Warwick's handwriting was bold, almost arrogant, filled with notes about rehearsals, costumes, and his fellow actors. One entry caught Poirot's eye. "Baxter's losing his grip. Thinks he can direct me like a puppet. Eleanor's getting too confident. Needs reining in." Poirot closed the notebook, his mind whirring. "The man, he was not without enemies," he murmured. He handed the case to Japp, who was now questioning a stagehand about the lighting cues. "Inspector, I suggest we speak to Mademoiselle Vance first. Her role in this tragedy, it is central. They found Eleanor in the green room, now surrounded by a gaggle of actors, all whispering and casting furtive glances. She had composed herself slightly, her hands folded in her lap, but her eyes were still haunted." Poirot approached, his demeanor gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle, a moment, s'il vous plaît. You and Monsieur Warwick, you were close?" Eleanor nodded, her lips trembling. "He was my mentor in a way. He pushed me to be better, to fight for my place on the stage. And yet," Poirot said, his voice soft as silk, "there were rumors of rivalry. That you envied his spotlight." Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "Envy? Number. I admired him. Yes, we competed, but it was professional. I would never—" Her voice faltered, and she looked away. Poirot noted the defensiveness, the quickness of her denial. He pressed no further, but his mind catalogued her reaction. Next, he turned to Baxter, who had followed them to the green room, his cigarette replaced by a glass of whiskey. "Monsieur Baxter, you argued with Warwick, no? About the play, perhaps?" Baxter's eyes narrowed. He was a prima donna, always wanting changes. "Last night he demanded we rewrite a scene to give Eleanor more lines. I told him to stick to acting, not directing." His tone was bitter, but Poirot sensed no guilt, only frustration. Finally, Poirot approached Riley, who lingered near the door, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Monsieur Riley, you admired Mademoiselle Vance, did you not?" Riley's face reddened. She's a fine actress. I watch her sometimes from the wings. That's all." But his stammer, his averted gaze spoke of something deeper, a devotion that bordered on obsession. As the night wore on, Poirot and Japp questioned the crew, piecing together the timeline. The prop knife had been checked at 6, as Riley claimed, but the first act's chaos, actors rushing to change, stagehands adjusting sets provided ample cover for a swap. Poirot returned to the stage, his eyes lingering on the dagger now in Japp's custody. He pictured the scene, Eleanor's hand, the blade flashing, Warwick's fall. The audience had seen a performance, but Poirot saw a puzzle, each piece a fragment of human passion. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking his reverie, "this is a devil of a case. A murder in plain sight, yet no one saw it coming." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The theater, mon ami, it is a mirror of life. It shows us what we wish to see and hides what we do not. But Hercule Poirot, he sees all." As the constable sealed the theater, Poirot's mind was already at work, sifting through motives, opportunities, and the subtle cues of human nature. The stage was set, and the detective was ready to unmask the killer. Chapter 3. The Director's Ambition. The Apollo Theater, now silent under the weight of tragedy, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the director's office. The backstage corridors, lit by flickering bulbs, were a labyrinth of narrow passages and cluttered alcoves, each corner heavy with the scent of old paint and sawdust. Poirot's polished shoes tapped a steady rhythm on the worn floorboards, his compact frame moving with a purpose that belied the chaos of the previous hours. Hastings, trailing behind, adjusted his hat, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease. "Dashed grim business, Poirot," he muttered. "Warwick was the toast of London, and now this." Poirot's green eyes flickered with a spark of concentration. "Oui, mon ami, but it is in the grimness that we find the truth. The stage, it is a canvas of passions, and tonight one passion has painted in blood." They reached a door marked R. Baxter, Director, its paint chipped, revealing layers of history beneath. Poirot knocked, a sharp, precise rap, and entered without waiting for an answer. Roland Baxter sat behind a cluttered desk, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his elbow, its amber contents catching the dim light of a single lamp. The office was a shrine to the theater. Posters of past productions plastered the walls. Scripts lay in untidy stacks, and a costume rack sagged under the weight of forgotten finery. Baxter, a wiry man with sharp cheekbones and a perpetually furrowed brow, looked up as Poirot entered, his eyes bloodshot but alert. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice rough with fatigue or liquor, "I suppose you're here to poke about?" "Well, I've nothing to hide." Poirot settled into a creaking chair, his posture immaculate, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Monsieur Baxter, a man is dead, and the theater, it is your domain. You will permit me to ask a few questions, non? His tone was polite, almost soothing, but there was a steel beneath it that made Baxter shift uncomfortably. Hastings remained standing, his notebook at the ready, ever the diligent scribe. Baxter lit a cigarette, the match flaring briefly in the gloom. "Ask away," he said, exhaling a plume of smoke. "Julian Warwick was a genius, but a bloody difficult one. Always meddling, always thinking he knew better than me." His lips twisted into a grimace. "Last night we had words. Sharp ones. He wanted to rewrite a scene, give more lines to Eleanor Vance. Said she deserved to shine. I told him to leave directing to me and stick to his marks." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of interest. "And this disagreement, it was heated?" Baxter shrugged, but his fingers tightened around the cigarette. "Heated enough. Julian had a way of getting under your skin. Thought he was the sun and we were all just orbiting him." Poirot noted the bitterness, the way Baxter's eyes darted to the whiskey bottle as if seeking refuge. "And yet," Poirot said softly, "you needed him. He was, as you say, a genius." His name drew the crowds. Baxter snorted, leaning back in his chair. "Crowds don't pay for a production gone to Shogun, to ruin. Julian was my star, but he was a liability too. Arrogant, demanding. I could have managed without him." He paused, his gaze hardening. "But I didn't kill him, if that's what you're thinking." Poirot's expression remained unreadable. "Monsieur, I think only of the truth. Tell me who had access to the prop knife before the performance." Baxter stubbed out his cigarette, his movements sharp. "Tom Riley, the stagehand. He's in charge of props, but anyone could have got to it. Actors, crew, even a stray visitor. Backstage is a zoo before a show. I was too busy keeping the actors in line to notice anything." Hastings, scribbling notes, looked up. "A zoo, eh? Sounds like a perfect cover for mischief." Baxter shot him a glare but said nothing, pouring another measure of whiskey. Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. "Monsieur Baxter, you are a man of ambition, non? A director who dreams of greatness. Did Warwick's interference threaten your vision?" Baxter's glass froze halfway to his lips. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. I wanted this play to succeed. Killing Julian would have sunk it. Look at the mess we're in now. Cancelled shows, police crawling everywhere." His voice was steady, but Poirot detected a faint tremor, a crack in the director's bravado. Ambition, he knew, could twist a man's soul into dark shapes. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat. "Merci, Monsieur Baxter. You have been most helpful. But the truth, it is like a script. It reveals itself line by line." He turned to leave, then paused. "One last question. You and Mademoiselle Vance, you are close?" Baxter's eyes narrowed. "Eleanor? She's my lead actress. I push her hard because she's got talent. That's all." But the sharpness in his tone, the quick glance away, told Poirot there was more to uncover. As they left the office, Hastings whispered, "He's a prickly sort, isn't he? Do you think he's hiding something?" Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Everyone hides something, mon ami. But whether it is murder, that is the question." They stepped into the corridor, the theater's silence pressing around them. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. Baxter's temper, his clash with Warwick, the unguarded prop table. The director's ambition was a palpable force, but was it enough to drive him to murder? Poirot's little gray cells hummed. piecing together the first threads of a complex tapestry. Chapter 4. The Co-Star's Tears. The Apollo Theater's dressing rooms, tucked behind the stage like secrets behind a velvet curtain, were a world apart from the grandeur of the auditorium. The air here was heavy with the scent of cold cream and talcum powder. The walls lined with mirrors framed in bulbs, some flickering, others dark. Hercule Poirot, his immaculate suit a stark contrast to the cluttered chaos, stepped into Eleanor Vance's dressing room, Captain Hastings at his heels. The room was small, its vanity strewn with makeup brushes, a half-drunk cup of tea, and a vase of wilting roses. Eleanor sat before the mirror, her emerald gown discarded for a silk robe, her auburn hair loose about her shoulders. Her face, stripped of stage makeup, was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and glistening with unshed tears. "Mademoiselle Vance," Poirot began, his voice soft as a whisper of silk. "Pardon the intrusion, but the matter of Monsieur Warwick's death, it demands answers." He settled into a chair, his posture precise, his green eyes fixed on her with a gaze that seemed to see through flesh to the soul beneath. Hastings, ever the gentleman, hovered near the door, his expression a mix of sympathy and curiosity. Eleanor's hands trembled as she clasped them in her lap. "I still can't believe it," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Julian, gone. And I held the knife." Her words broke and a tear slipped down her cheek, catching the light like a fallen star. Hastings, moved by her distress, stepped forward, offering his handkerchief. There, Miss Vance," he said gently. "It's a dreadful shock, but Poirot will get to the bottom of it." Poirot, unmoved by the display, tilted his head slightly. "Mademoiselle, you were magnificent on stage tonight, no? Your Lady Beatrice, she was a woman of fire and shadow. But tell me, the dagger, when you took it in your hand, did you feel nothing unusual? Its weight, perhaps, or its balance?" His tone was conversational, but his eyes missed nothing. The flicker of her gaze, the tightening of her fingers. Eleanor shook her head, her voice unsteady. "It felt normal. I've used it in rehearsals for weeks. The scene was so quick, so intense, I didn't think. I just followed the blocking, thrust as we'd practiced." She paused, her eyes meeting Poirot's for a fleeting moment before darting away. "When he fell, I thought it was part of his performance. Julian was always so real. But then I saw the blood." Her voice cracked, and she pressed the handkerchief to her lips. Poirot leaned forward, his hands steepled. "You and Monsieur Warwick, you were close, were you not? A friendship, perhaps, forged in the crucible of the stage." Eleanor nodded slowly, her expression softening. "He was kind to me when I started. This was my first major role, and Julian believed in me. He'd stay late after rehearsals, helping me with my lines, teaching me how to hold the audience." Her voice warmed with memory, but Poirot detected a shadow beneath her words. "And yet," he said, his tone gentle but probing, "there are whispers, mademoiselle, of rivalry. That you perhaps resented his brilliance, his command of the spotlight." Eleanor's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with a sudden fire that belied her fragile demeanor. "Rivalry? That's nonsense. Julian was the star, and I was proud to share the stage with him. Yes, I wanted to prove myself, but I never resented him." Her voice was firm, but Poirot noted the quickness of her denial, the way her hands twisted the handkerchief into knots. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, glanced at Poirot, his brow furrowed. "Surely, Poirot, you don't think Miss Vance could—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. I think only of the facts, mon ami. And the facts, they tell us the dagger was no prop. Someone placed it there, knowing you, mademoiselle, would wield it. He paused, his gaze steady. Tell me, who else was near the prop table during the first act? Eleanor's brow creased, her fingers stilling. It's hard to say. The wings are always busy. Stagehands, actors, the costume mistress. I was in my dressing room until my cue, but I passed the prop table on my way to the stage. I didn't notice anything odd. Her voice was earnest, but Poirot's mind catalogued the hesitation, the slight catch in her breath. Was it fear or something deeper? He rose, smoothing his coat with a practiced gesture. Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful, but the heart, it is a complex stage, and its truths are not always spoken aloud. Eleanor looked up, her eyes wide, but Poirot offered only a polite nod before turning to leave. Hastings followed, casting a sympathetic glance back at the actress, whose silhouette seemed to shrink against the harsh light of the dressing room. In the corridor, Hastings exhaled. Poor girl, Poirot. She's shaken to the core. You don't really suspect her, do you? Poirot's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. Suspect, mon ami. I suspect everyone until the little gray cells prove otherwise. Mademoiselle Vance, she is an actress, and the stage is her mask. But beneath it there is passion. Perhaps love, perhaps envy. We must see which. They paused at the end of the corridor, where a narrow window overlooked the darkened street. The theater, once alive with the hum of anticipation, now felt like a tomb, its secrets locked in the hearts of those who walked its boards. Poirot's mind was already at work, weaving Eleanor's tears, her denials, and her fleeting glances into the tapestry of the crime. The truth, he knew, was a performance yet to be unveiled. Chapter 5. The Stagehand's Secret. The Apollo Theater's prop room, a cavernous space tucked beneath the stage, was a cluttered kingdom of forgotten treasures. Wooden crates overflowed with tarnished goblets, moth-eaten cloaks, and papier-mâché crowns, their surfaces dusted with the patina of countless performances. The air was thick with the musty scent of old canvas and the faint tang of metal polish. Hercule Poirot, his immaculate suit a stark contrast to the room's disarray, stepped carefully over a coil of rope, his green eyes scanning the shadows. Captain Hastings followed, his brow furrowed as he navigated the narrow path between towering shelves, his notebook clutched tightly. Rather a gloomy spot, Poirot, Hastings remarked, his voice echoing slightly in the dim space. All these props, it's like a graveyard for old plays. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. Oui, mon ami. But even in a graveyard there are secrets to be unearthed. And here, among these relics, we may find the key to Monsieur Warwick's death. They found Tom Riley, the stagehand, near a workbench littered with tools and scraps of fabric. He was a wiry young man, his face pale under a mop of unruly brown hair, his fingers fidgeting with a screwdriver as if it were a talisman. When he saw Poirot, his eyes darted nervously and he cracked his knuckles, a sharp staccato sound that cut through the silence. Mr. Poirot, he said, his voice high and unsteady, I didn't expect you down here. I've told the police everything I know. Poirot settled onto a rickety stool, his posture as precise as ever, his hands folded neatly in his lap. Monsieur Riley, it is not to the police that I come, but to you. The prop knife. It was your responsibility, no? And yet, a real blade found its way onto the stage. Tell me, how does such a thing happen under your watch? His tone was gentle, almost coaxing, but his gaze was unrelenting, piercing through Riley's unease like a spotlight. Riley shifted, his eyes flickering to the workbench. I swear, sir, I checked the knife before the show. 6 o'clock, like always. It was the prop one. Blunt, wooden handle, no edge to it. I put it on the table myself. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. After that, I was running around, checking lights, moving set pieces. I didn't see the table again until it happened. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but probing. And during this time, Monsieur Riley, where were you? The first act, it is a busy time, but you are a man who watches, who observes. What did you see? Riley's face flushed, and he cracked his knuckles again, the sound grating in the confined space. I was in the wings, he admitted, his voice low. I like to watch. I watched the performance. Miss Vance, Miss Eleanor, she's something special. The way she moves, the way she speaks. His words trailed off, and he looked away, his cheeks burning. Hastings, standing by a shelf of dusty swords, raised an eyebrow. Watching Miss Vance, eh? Bit of a fan, are you? His tone was light, but Poirot noted the stagehand's discomfort, the way his shoulders hunched as if shielding a secret. Monsieur Riley, Poirot said, his voice like a velvet blade. This admiration for Mademoiselle Vance, it is more than professional, is it not? Perhaps a devotion? A passion? Riley's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic. It's not like that. I admire her, that's all. She's kind to everyone, even us stagehands, not like Warwick. His voice hardened at the mention of the dead actor. He was always strutting about, acting like he owned the place. Called me a nobody once, right to my face. Said I'd never be good enough for someone like Eleanor. Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the flicker of resentment in Riley's words. And this insult, it wounded you, oui? Enough to make you angry? Riley's hand stilled, and he shook his head vehemently. Angry, sure, but I didn't kill him. I wouldn't do that. Besides, I was in the wings when it happened, nowhere near the prop table. His voice was earnest, but Poirot noted the slight tremor, the way his eyes avoided contact. Tell me, monsieur, Poirot continued, who else was near the prop table during the first act? A name, a face, anything you recall. Riley frowned, his brow creasing as he thought. It's hard to say. The wings were a mess, actors coming and going, costume changes, the lighting crew shouting cues. I saw Mr. Baxter barking orders, and the wardrobe mistress was fussing over Miss Vance's gown. But I wasn't watching the table. I should have been, but... He trailed off, his guilt palpable. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and approached the workbench, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of a hammer. The prop table. It is close to the wings, oui? Anyone could have approached it in the chaos. He turned back to Riley, his gaze steady. And you, monsieur, with your duties, you move freely backstage. A man in love, he might do much to protect or to avenge the object of his affection. Riley's face paled further, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the screwdriver. I didn't touch that knife, I swear it. I'd never hurt Miss Vance like that, making her do what she did. His voice cracked, and Poirot saw a flicker of genuine anguish. But was it for Eleanor, or for himself? The detective filed the observation away, his mind a whirl of possibilities. Hastings, ever practical, stepped forward. "Look here, Riley, if you're innocent, help us out. Did you notice anything odd? Anyone lingering near the props, maybe?" Riley hesitated, then shook his head. "I wish I had. It all happened so fast. 1 minute everything's fine, and the next—" He gestured vaguely as if the weight of the tragedy was too much to articulate. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, not of amusement but of understanding. "Merci, Monsieur Riley. You have given me much to consider. The heart, it speaks loudly, even when the lips are silent." He turned to leave, then paused, his eyes catching a glint of metal beneath a pile of fabric on the workbench. He reached down, carefully lifting a scrap of velvet to reveal a small, tarnished key. "And this, monsieur? What does it unlock?" Riley's eyes widened and he stammered. "That's just a spare for the prop room door. We keep it here in case we get locked out." Poirot nodded, slipping the key into his pocket with a deft movement. "Curieux," he murmured. "A key, it opens many things, doors, secrets, truths." As they left the prop room, Hastings whispered, "That chap's got it bad for Miss Vance, hasn't he?" "Think he's our man?" Poirot's expression was enigmatic. "He is a man in love, mon ami, and love, it is a motive as old as the stage itself. But whether it is love that killed or something else, that is what we must discover." They emerged into the corridor, the theater's silence wrapping around them like a cloak. Poirot's mind was a tapestry of threads. Riley's devotion, his resentment of Warwick, the unguarded prop table. Each was a clue, a fragment of the puzzle that was Julian Warwick's murder. The detective's little gray cells hummed, sensing that the truth, like a well-rehearsed scene, was waiting in the wings. Chapter 6. The theater's shadows. The Apollo Theater, stripped of its evening glamour, lay under the stark glare of house lights, its magic reduced to bare wood and faded paint. Hercule Poirot stood center stage, his polished shoes planted firmly on the boards where Julian Warwick had fallen. The crimson curtain hung motionless, a silent sentinel guarding the secrets of the night. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, paced the wings, his eyes scanning the ropes and pulleys that loomed like skeletal remains of the performance. "It's eerie, Poirot," he said, his voice low as if afraid to disturb the stillness. "This place feels alive even now, like it's watching us." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, reflecting the harsh light. "Oui, mon ami, the theater, it is a living thing. It breathes with the passions of those who tread its boards. And tonight, it holds the secret of a murder." He turned, his gaze sweeping the stage, lingering on the prop table just beyond the wings. It was a modest affair, cluttered with goblets, a candelabra, and a coil of velvet rope, its surface scarred from years of hurried hands. The spot where the fatal dagger had rested was marked by a faint outline in the dust, a ghostly reminder of the crime. Poirot approached the table, his gloved fingers hovering above its surface, as if sensing the echoes of the act. "Here, Hastings," he said, his voice soft but precise, "is where the illusion became reality." The prop knife, it was replaced with a true blade, and yet no one saw the exchange. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, frowned. "It's right by the wings, Poirot. Anyone could have slipped in during the first act's bustle. Actors, crew, even a stray visitor." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching. "But the act, it was not random. It was timed, choreographed, like a scene in the play itself." He stepped back, his eyes tracing the path from the prop table to the stage. then to the darkened wings where shadows clung to the rafters. Come, mon ami, let us reconstruct the moment. They moved to the wings, where a narrow passage led to the backstage corridors. The area was a maze of crates and cables, the air thick with the scent of grease paint and sawdust. Poirot paused, his head tilted as if listening to the theater's pulse. The first act, he mused. It is a time of chaos, oui? Actors rush to their marks. Stagehands adjust the lights, the director barks orders. In this whirlwind, the knife was swapped, unseen. Hastings nodded, his notebook open. Riley said he checked the knife at 6, so it had to be after that. But how do you swap a knife in front of everyone? Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. You do not, mon ami. You swap it when all eyes are elsewhere. On the stage, on the actors, on the story. The murderer, he used the theater's rhythm to his advantage. Determined to test this theory, Poirot summoned a stagehand, a grizzled man named Harris, who had worked the wings during the performance. Harris, his face lined with years of late nights, shuffled forward, his cap twisted in his hands. "Mr. Poirot, sir," he said, his voice gruff. "I didn't see nothing odd. I was busy with the curtains and the light cues. The prop table's just there, but I ain't paid to watch it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, Monsieur Harris, you see much, do you not? The comings and goings of the cast and crew. Tell me, who passed near the prop table during the first act?" Harris scratched his chin, his brow furrowing. "Well, now, it's hard to say. Miss Vance came through for her entrance and missed her. Baxter was hovering, shouting at us to keep the timing tight. Riley was in and out, checking props. Oh, and the wardrobe mistress, Mrs. Tate, she was fussing with a torn hem on Miss Vance's gown." Poirot's interest sharpened. "Mrs. Tate, you say? She was near the table?" Harris nodded. "Aye, she was right there, pinning up Miss Vance's dress just before the second act. But she's harmless, sir. Been here longer than most of us." Poirot filed the information away, his mind turning over the new name. A wardrobe mistress, he thought, would have easy access to the wings, her presence unremarkable. Leaving Harris, Poirot and Hastings returned to the stage, where Inspector Japp was overseeing the removal of Warwick's body. The inspector, his bowler hat askew, looked up as they approached. "Poirot, this case is a nightmare," he grumbled. "No witnesses, no clear motive, and a theater full of suspects. Got anything yet?" Poirot's expression was serene, but his eyes burned with focus. "The little gray cells, they are at work, Inspector. But I require one thing more. The original prop knife." Japp raised an eyebrow. "The prop? Thought it'd be long gone." Poirot shook his head. "No, the murderer, he is clever, but not so clever as to discard it far. It is here, in the theater, waiting to be found." He turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, you are a man of action. Search the backstage areas, costume trunks, storage closets. The knife, it will tell us much." Hastings, eager to contribute, set off with a constable, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. Poirot remained on stage, his gaze lingering on the spot where Warwick had fallen. He pictured the scene. Eleanor Vance, her face alight with passion, seizing the dagger. Warwick, unsuspecting, meeting his end in a moment meant for drama. The precision of the act intrigued him. The murderer had not only swapped the knife, but ensured it would pass unnoticed until the fatal thrust. After a quarter of an hour, Hastings returned, his face flushed with triumph. "Found it, Poirot," he exclaimed, holding up a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside was a blunt prop knife, its wooden handle identical to the real one, its blade harmlessly dull. It was in a costume trunk buried under some old capes. Whoever hid it didn't want it found easily. Poirot took the knife, his gloved fingers examining it carefully. A faint smudge caught his eye, a trace of powdery residue, pale and shimmering like the makeup Eleanor Vance wore. "Curieux," Poirot murmured, his voice barely audible. "This residue, it is theatrical makeup, non? The kind an actress might wear." Hastings' eyes widened. "You think Eleanor hid it? But why would she incriminate herself?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mon ami, she did not hide it. Perhaps another wished to point the finger at her. The theater, it is a place of misdirection." He handed the knife to Jap, who bagged it for evidence. "Good work, Poirot," the inspector said. "This proves the swap was deliberate." "But we're no closer to knowing who." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Patience, Inspector. The truth, it is like a spotlight. It reveals all in time." As they left the stage, Poirot's mind was a whirl of images: the prop table, the makeup smudge, the crowded wings. Harris's account had added a new player, Mrs. Tate, the wardrobe mistress, whose presence near the table could not be ignored. The threads of the case were tightening, each clue a step closer to the killer's identity. Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the chase, his little gray cells dancing in the shadows of the theater. Chapter 7. A Motive Unmasked. The morning light filtered weakly through the high windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. The room, with its meticulous order, books aligned on shelves, a silver tea service gleaming on a tray, reflected the detective's precise mind. Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his hands steepled, his green eyes fixed on a point beyond the room, as if the answers to Julian Warwick's murder lay in the ether. Captain Hastings opposite him stirred his tea absent-mindedly, his brow furrowed with the weight of the case. Inspector Japp, his bowler hat resting on the table, leaned forward, his notebook open, his face a mix of impatience and curiosity. "Poirot, you've been poking about that theater for hours," Japp said, his voice tinged with exasperation. "We've got a real knife, a prop knife with makeup on it, and a stage full of suspects. But where's the motive? Without that, we're chasing shadows." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Shadows, Inspector, are precisely what we chase. But the murder of Monsieur Warwick, it is not a shadow. It is a deliberate act, rooted in the passions of the human heart. Jealousy, ambition, or perhaps love betrayed." Hastings set down his cup, the porcelain clinking softly. "It's a devil of a puzzle, Poirot. Eleanor Vance wielded the knife, but she seemed genuinely shattered. Baxter's got a temper, and Riley's smitten with Eleanor, but none of it quite fits." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "Précisément, mon ami. The pieces, they are scattered, but the little gray cells, they begin to arrange them. We must consider the motives, and we must look to the man himself. Julian Warwick." Poirot reached for a small leather case delivered earlier by Japp's constable containing Warwick's personal effects. He opened it with care, revealing a pocket watch, a silver cigarette case, and the worn notebook that had caught his attention at the theater. "This notebook," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding. "It is the voice of the dead speaking to us. He flipped through its pages, his gloved fingers pausing at entries scrawled in Warwick's bold hand. The actor's words were a mix of arrogance and insight, detailing rehearsals, costume disputes, and his thoughts on his fellow players. One entry, dated a week before the murder, stood out. Poirot read aloud, "Baxter thinks he can control me, but he's a fool. This is my stage, my triumph. Eleanor's getting bold, too bold. She thinks she can outshine me, but she's mistaken. I'll see to it she knows her place." Jap let out a low whistle. Sounds like Warwick wasn't exactly a saint. That could have ruffled feathers. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, Inspector. Feathers ruffled, egos bruised." Warwick was a man who inspired both admiration and resentment. He turned to another page, dated 2 days prior. "Baxter's losing his nerve. Threatened to walk out if I pushed for more changes. Eleanor's playing the innocent, but I see her ambition. Riley follows her like a puppy. Pathetic." Poirot closed the notebook, his expression thoughtful. "Here, we see the threads. Ambition, rivalry, unrequited love. Each a motive, each a spark that could ignite murder." Hastings leaned forward, his eyes wide. "You think Eleanor was jealous enough to kill? Or Baxter to protect his production?" Poirot shook his head. "Not so simple, mon ami. Jealousy, it is a fire, but it burns differently in each heart. Mademoiselle Vance, she is an actress, skilled in hiding her true feelings. Monsieur Baxter, his ambition is for glory, but perhaps he saw Warwick as a threat to that glory. And Monsieur Riley, his love for Mademoiselle Vance, it is a wound that Warwick's scorn deepened." Jap tapped his pencil against his notebook. "But the knife, Poirot. Eleanor's the one who used it. Her hands, her scene. If she didn't know it was real, someone set her up. If she did—" He trailed off, his implication clear. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The knife, it is the tool, but the hand that placed it there, that is the key. The makeup on the prop knife, it suggests a connection to Mademoiselle Vance, but perhaps too neatly. A clever murderer might wish to point us in her direction." Hastings frowned. "You mean someone framed her? But who? Riley to protect her? Baxter to save his play?" Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming. "Patience, mon ami. We must consider another possibility. The wardrobe mistress, Mrs. Tate, Monsieur Harris, placed her near the prop table during the first act. Her presence, it is unremarkable. Yet she had opportunity." Jap's brow furrowed. "Mrs. Tate? She's just an old seamstress, been with the theater for years. What motive would she have?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Motive, Inspector, is not always obvious. A woman who has served the theater so long she sees all, every slight, every secret. Perhaps Warwick crossed her in some way we do not yet know." Poirot rose, pacing the room with measured steps, his mind a whirl of connections. "Let us consider the scene," he said, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. "The first act, it is a storm of activity. The prop table, it is unguarded, a moment's distraction enough for the swap. Mademoiselle Vance, she passes through for her entrance. Monsieur Baxter, he is shouting orders. Monsieur Riley, he is watching his beloved. And Mrs. Tate, she is there, her needle and thread unnoticed. One of them took the prop knife, hid it, and placed the real blade in its place." Hastings, caught up in the narrative, leaned forward. "But why hide the prop knife? Why not just toss it?" Poirot's smile was sharp. "Because, mon ami, the prop knife is evidence. To discard it risks discovery. To hide it buys time. And the makeup smudge, It is either a mistake or a deliberate clue to mislead us. Japp scribbled a note, his face grim. Right then. I'll have my men question Mrs. Tate and dig into Warwick's past. Maybe he had enemies we don't know about. Poirot nodded, his expression serene. Oui, Inspector, and I shall return to the theater. The stage. It holds more secrets yet. As Japp gathered his things, Poirot turned to the window, his gaze distant. The case was a tapestry of human passions. Eleanor's ambition, Baxter's pride, Riley's devotion, and perhaps Mrs. Tate's hidden grudge. Each thread was vibrant, but only one led to murder. The little gray cells, they hummed with anticipation, sensing the truth was near, waiting to be unmasked in the theater's shadowed heart. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The auditorium of the Apollo Theater, bathed in the harsh glow of house lights, had shed its evening enchantment, its rows of crimson seats now empty save for the ghosts of last night's tragedy. Hercule Poirot stood center stage, his diminutive figure commanding the vast space as if he were the star of a grand drama. The heavy curtain behind him loomed like a silent judge, its folds hiding the echoes of Julian Warwick's final performance. Captain Hastings stood to one side, his notebook tucked away, his eyes scanning the gathered suspects with a mix of anticipation and unease. Inspector Japp, his bowler had tilted back, hovered near the orchestra pit, his constables stationed at the exits to ensure no one slipped away. Poirot had summoned the key players, Eleanor Vance, Roland Baxter, Tom Riley, and at his insistence, Mrs. Tate, the wardrobe mistress, to the auditorium. They sat in the front row, an uneasy tableau of tension and suspicion. Eleanor, her auburn hair pinned tightly, her face pale but composed, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes fixed on the stage floor. Baxter, his sharp features drawn, tapped a cigarette against its case, his impatience palpable. Riley, his wiry frame hunched, cracked his knuckles nervously, his gaze flickering toward Eleanor. Mrs. Tate, a stout woman with gray hair pulled into a severe bun, sat ramrod straight, her hands folded over a worn sewing kit, her expression unreadable. Poirot's voice, clear and resonant, cut through the silence. Mesdames et messieurs, we are gathered here in this theater of illusion to unmask a truth most grim. Julian Warwick, a star of the stage, was struck down not by the script but by a real blade wielded in a moment meant for art. This was no accident, it was murder planned with the precision of a well-rehearsed scene. His green eyes swept over the suspects, each reacting in their own way. Eleanor's lips parted, Baxter's cigarette froze mid-tap. Riley's knuckles stilled, and Mrs. Tate's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Hastings, standing near the stage's edge, whispered to Japp, "He's in his element now, isn't he?" Like a director staging the final act, Japp grunted, his attention fixed on Poirot. "Let's hope he's got more than theatrics up his sleeve." Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the boards. The dagger, it was swapped during the first act when the wings were alive with movement. The prop table, so close to the chaos, was the perfect stage for this deception. But who among you had the motive to turn a play into a tragedy? He paused, letting the question hang, his gaze moving from face to face. He turned first to Baxter. "Monsieur Baxter, you are a man of ambition, no? A director who dreams of immortality through his art. Yet Warwick, he challenged your vision, demanded changes, threatened your control. His brilliance was your triumph, but also your burden." Baxter's eyes flashed, and he leaned forward, his voice sharp. "I told you, Poirot, I needed Julian alive. His death's ruined everything, my play, my reputation. I'd be a fool to kill him." Poirot nodded, his expression serene. "Perhaps, monsieur. But ambition, it can blind a man to reason." Next, Poirot faced Riley, whose face reddened under the scrutiny. "Monsieur Riley, your heart, it beats for Mademoiselle Vance. Warwick, he mocked you, called you a nobody. Such words, they wound deeply, do they not? Deep enough, perhaps, to drive a man to act?" Riley shook his head vehemently, his voice rising. "I hated him for that. Yes, but I wouldn't kill him. I was in the wings, watching the play, not the prop table." His eyes darted to Eleanor, and Poirot noted the desperation in his tone, the plea for her to believe him. Poirot's gaze shifted to Mrs. Tate, who met it with a steady, almost defiant stare. "Madam Tate, you are the unseen thread in this tapestry. You moved through the theater, your presence unnoticed, yet you were near the prop table, pinning a hem on Mademoiselle Vance's gown. A woman who has served this stage for years, she sees much, perhaps too much." Mrs. Tate's lips tightened, but her voice was calm. "I'm just the wardrobe mistress, Mr. Poirot. I mend costumes, not plot murders. I had no quarrel with Mr. Warwick." Her words were measured, but Poirot detected a faint edge, a hint of something guarded. Finally, he turned to Eleanor, whose hands twisted the handkerchief into knots. "Mademoiselle Vance, you held the dagger, you struck the blow. Your grief, it is real, but is it for Warwick or for the consequences of your act? In his notebook, he wrote of your ambition, your desire to outshine him. Jealousy, it is a poison that can turn even a friend into a foe." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I admired Julian, I told you that. I never wanted him dead. I didn't know the knife was real." Her anguish rang through the auditorium, but Poirot's expression remained impassive. He stepped to the center of the stage, his voice rising with authority. "The truth, it lies in the motives and the moments. The makeup on the prop knife, it points to Mademoiselle Vance, but too perfectly, perhaps. A clever murderer might leave such a clue to mislead. The prop knife, hidden in a costume trunk, was meant to stay hidden, but not forever. The key to the prop room, found by Monsieur Riley's workbench, suggests access, opportunity. And yet, only one among you had the heart to weave these threads into murder." Poirot paused, his eyes locking onto Eleanor's. "Mademoiselle Vance, it is you who stand at the heart of this tragedy. Your ambition, it burned brighter than you admit. Warwick's notebook reveals his fear of your rising star, his intent to keep you in his shadow. You found a real dagger, its handle identical to the prop, in a shop you visited for costume fittings. You swapped it during the first act, intending not to kill but to falter him, to steal his moment. But the blade, it was sharper than you knew, and your staged thrust became fatal." Eleanor's face crumpled, a sob escaping her lips. "No, I didn't mean to kill him," she whispered, her voice raw. "I was angry, yes. He kept belittling me, saying I'd never be as great as him. I found the knife in a prop shop, thought it'd scare him, make him stumble on stage. I swapped it during the chaos when Mrs. Tate was fixing my gown. But I didn't know it would. I didn't mean—" Her words dissolved into tears, her body shaking. Japp stepped forward, his face grim but softened by pity. "That's enough, Miss Vance. You'll have to come with us. He signaled to a constable who approached gently as if handling a fragile prop. Eleanor rose, her movements mechanical, her eyes distant. Baxter stared, his cigarette forgotten, while Riley's face twisted with anguish, his hands clenched into fists. Mrs. Tate remained still, her expression unreadable, but Poirot caught a fleeting glint of satisfaction in her eyes, as if a long-held grievance had been settled. As Eleanor was led away, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "Good Lord, Poirot, you saw through it all. But how did you know it was her?" Poirot's smile was faint, almost sad. "The little gray cells, mon ami, they see the patterns. The makeup on the prop knife, it was hers, but placed too deliberately. Her grief, it was real, but tinged with guilt. And Warwick's notebook, it revealed a rivalry she could not deny. She acted not from hatred, but from a wounded pride, a desire to shine." The auditorium fell silent, the weight of the truth settling like dust on the empty seats. Poirot turned to the curtain, his gaze distant. The theater, with all its illusions, had revealed its darkest secret, and the detective's work was done. For now. Chapter 9. The Confession. The Apollo Theater's green room, a haven of faded elegance, was steeped in a somber hush as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings entered, their footsteps muffled by the worn carpet. The room, with its sagging armchairs and walls adorned with photographs of past productions, seemed to hold the weight of the night's revelations. Eleanor Vance sat on a threadbare sofa, her hands cuffed, her auburn hair falling in disarray around her pale face. Inspector Japp stood nearby, his notebook tucked away. His expression a blend of professional resolve and reluctant sympathy. Two constables flanked the door, their presence a silent reminder of the law's unyielding grip. Poirot, his immaculate suit untouched by the chaos of the evening, settled into a chair opposite Eleanor, his green eyes fixed on her with a gaze that was both gentle and unrelenting. Hastings hovered near a chipped coffee table, his face etched with discomfort at the sight of the actress. So recently a vision of grace, now reduced to a figure of despair. "Poor girl," he murmured almost to himself. "To think she only meant to shake him up, not—" His voice trailed off, and he glanced at Poirot, seeking reassurance. Poirot's moustache twitched, his voice soft but clear. "Mademoiselle Vance, the stage is set for truth, and you have played your part. But the curtain has not yet fallen. Speak, s'il vous plaît, and tell us all. How did this tragedy unfold?" His tone was not accusatory but inviting, as if coaxing a reluctant performer to deliver her final lines. Eleanor's eyes, red-rimmed and glistening, met Poirot's for a moment before dropping to her hands. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, raw with emotion. "I never meant to kill him. You must believe me, Mr. Poirot. I only wanted to make him falter, to show him I could hold my own." She paused, her breath hitching, and Japp leaned forward, his face softening despite himself. "Go on, Miss Vance," Japp said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "Tell us everything. It'll go better for you if you do." Eleanor nodded, her fingers twisting together, the handcuffs clinking softly. "Julian was everything. The star, the genius. When I joined the company, I was nobody, a chorus girl with dreams too big for my talent. He saw something in me, helped me get this role. But he never let me forget I was second to him." Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "And this, mademoiselle, it wounded your pride, no? To be forever in his shadow?" Eleanor's lips trembled and a tear slipped down her cheek. Yes. He'd praise me in rehearsals, but then he'd say things, little jabs, like I'd never match him. In his notebook, he wrote I was getting too bold, that he'd put me in my place. It hurt, Mr. Poirot. I wanted to prove I was more than his protégé. She took a shaky breath, her voice growing steadier as she continued. A week ago, I was at a prop shop in Covent Garden looking for costume pieces. I saw this dagger. Its handle was identical to our prop knife, but the blade was real, sharp. I don't know why I bought it. Maybe I didn't even know then what I'd do. But the idea came later during rehearsals when Julian kept pushing me down, mocking my ambition in front of everyone. Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching every nuance of her confession. And so you plan to use this dagger to disrupt his performance, to steal his moment? Eleanor nodded, her gaze distant. Yes. I thought if he stumbled, if he looked weak, the audience would see me instead. I didn't want to hurt him, just shake him. I swapped the knives during the first act when Mrs. Tate was fixing my gown in the wings. It was easy. Everyone was distracted, the prop table right there. I slipped the real knife in place and hid the prop one in a costume trunk. Hastings, unable to stay silent, stepped forward. But, Miss Vance, didn't you realize the risk? A real blade in a staged fight? Eleanor's eyes filled with fresh tears. I thought I could control it. The thrust was choreographed, light, just a touch to his chest. I didn't know the blade was so sharp, so deadly. When he fell, when I saw the blood. Her voice broke and she buried her face in her hands, her sobs echoing in the quiet room. Poirot leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. And the makeup on the prop knife, mademoiselle? It was yours, was it not? Eleanor looked up, startled. I suppose it could have been. I was wearing my stage makeup when I hid the prop knife. I didn't think about it leaving a trace. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the detail. The smudge, he thought, was no accident. It was the mark of her haste, her panic. Japp scribbled a final note, his face set. That's a clear enough confession, Miss Vance. Manslaughter, maybe, if the court's lenient, but you'll have to answer for it. He signaled to the constables, who stepped forward, their movements careful, as if handling a fragile relic. Eleanor rose, her shoulders slumped, her elegance replaced by a weary resignation. I'm sorry, she whispered, to no one in particular. I only wanted to shine. As the constables led her away, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. What a tragedy, Poirot. She didn't mean to kill him, but she's ruined herself all the same. Poirot's expression was somber, his eyes distant. Oui, mon ami. The stage, it amplifies the heart's desires, ambition, pride, love. Mademoiselle Vance. She sought the spotlight, but found only darkness. The green room fell silent, the weight of Eleanor's confession lingering like a final curtain call. Poirot rose, smoothing his coat, his mind already turning to the theater's empty stage, where the echoes of the crime would fade, but never vanish. Chapter 10. The Curtain Falls. The Apollo Theater stood silent under a gray London sky, its golden facade dulled by the morning mist that clung to the West End's cobble machinelles. The posters for a dance of shadows, still plastered across the entrance, seemed like relics of a forgotten era, their vibrant promises marred by the shadow of Julian Warwick's death. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, stood outside the theater, his polished shoes gleaming despite the damp. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood beside him, his hat tilted back, his face a mix of relief and melancholy as he watched the bustle of the street, cabs rattling by, vendors calling, life resuming its relentless rhythm. "Well, Poirot," Hastings said, his voice carrying a note of finality, "you've done it again. Unraveled the knot, caught the killer, or rather the would-be saboteur who went too far." He clapped a hand on Poirot's shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that the detective tolerated with a faint twitch of his mustache. Poor Miss Vance, such a talent, and now off to face the law. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as ever, gazed at the theater's entrance, where a workman was already removing a poster, its edges curling in the damp air. "Oui, mon ami," he said softly. "The tragedy of Mademoiselle Vance, it is not only in the act but in the heart that drove it. She sought to shine, but the stage, it demands a price for such ambition." His voice held a trace of sadness, a rare glimpse into the detective's empathy for the frailties of human nature. The theater was preparing to reopen, its manager determined to salvage the season with a new lead, though whispers of the scandal still hung in the air like stage smoke. Inside, the crew bustled, resetting props and repairing costumes as if to erase the stain of that fatal night. Poirot had declined an invitation to inspect the preparations, his work here complete. Yet the theater's pull lingered, its boards imprinted with the drama of life and death. Hastings shifted, his hands in his pockets. What about Baxter and Riley? And that wardrobe mistress, Mrs. Tate? They all had their secrets, didn't they? Poirot nodded, his gaze drifting to the neon sign above the theater, its letters flickering in the daylight. "Indeed, mon ami." Monsieur Baxter, his ambition was for control, not blood. Monsieur Riley, his love for Mademoiselle Vance was a fire, but it burned only in his heart. And Madame Tate, he paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. She saw much, perhaps too much, but her role was that of a witness, not a player in this crime. Hastings frowned, his mind turning over the case's threads. That makeup smudge on the prop knife. It was a clever touch, wasn't it? Made it look like Eleanor was careless when really it was just her panic. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Précisément. The little gray cells, they saw the truth in that smudge. It was not planted to frame her, but a mistake of haste, a mark of her own hand in the rush to hide the prop. They began to walk, the theater receding behind them, its silhouette swallowed by the mist. Poirot's mind, though satisfied with the resolution, was already restless, sensing the world's endless supply of mysteries. "The theater, Hastings," he said, his voice low. "It is a mirror of life. It shows us desire, pride, betrayal, all the passions that drive men and women to act and sometimes to destroy." Hastings chuckled, his mood lightening. "You make it sound so grand, Poirot. But I suppose that's why you're the best, always seeing the drama beneath the surface." He glanced at his friend, a twinkle in his eye. "What's next, then?" "Another case to keep those gray cells buzzing." Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The little gray cells, mon ami, they do not rest. There is always another stage, another curtain to rise." He adjusted his hat, his stride purposeful as they turned onto a bustling street, the city's pulse drawing them forward. In the world of Hercule Poirot, the curtain never truly fell, and the next mystery waited just beyond the footlights.